It was late at night, and I suddenly felt as if a shadow had passed near my window. Terrified, I sat up immediately. This had been happening to me for many nights since my husband passed away. I mustered up the courage, walked to the window, and looked outside. The air was still, and there wasn't a soul in sight. Shaking my head, I tried to dismiss it as my imagination. But just as I was about to return to my room, I felt a hand clamp over my mouth. My scream caught in my throat, unable to escape. The man dragged me into another room. I wanted to scream, shout for help, but his hand remained firmly over my mouth. The room was cloaked in darkness, and the man's face was covered with a black cloth. I couldn't make out who he was. I struggled, fought against his grip, but he was far too strong. I began to plead, my voice muffled by his hand. "Please, don't do this. I'm still in mourning. For the sake of God, don't harm me. I want to remain loyal to my husband's memory. Please don't tarnish my dignity." But the man ignored my every plea. With cold disregard, he threw me onto the bed and proceeded to violate me. Tears streamed down my face, and I felt my soul shatter. I had always carried myself with dignity. I was known for my beauty, admired by everyone, yet I never flaunted it, never allowed myself to be seen as anything other than a devoted wife. And now, in this moment, that sacred dignity was destroyed by someone I couldn't even identify. I had always taken pride in remaining honorable and keeping myself away from the gaze of others. But now, the very thing I had protected so carefully was taken from me without a second thought. After he had done his deed, he grabbed me roughly and pushed me back into my room. Before he could leave, I reached up and tore the black cloth from his face. The sight before me was beyond anything I could have imagined. My knees gave way beneath me, and I stumbled back, trembling. The man who had just ripped away my dignity was none other than my late husband's brother. My name is Noreen. I spent the first 22 years of my life in my parents' home. I never felt any rush to get married, but my mother was eager for me to settle down early. She always said that the sooner a girl has her own home, the better. I was exceptionally beautiful. Whenever someone saw me, they couldn't take their eyes off me. I had been blessed with natural beauty, and I was proud of it. People never stopped praising me. Whenever I dressed up, all eyes were on me with envy. Many of my cousins dreamed of marrying me, but I never gave them the time of day. It wasn't that I was arrogant or full of myself. I simply wanted my future husband to meet my standards. One day, my aunt brought a very suitable proposal for me. When my mother visited their home and saw the young man, she immediately agreed. The young man's sister had first seen me at my aunt's house, where she had come to get some clothes stitched. She had chosen me as a match for her younger brother. Her brother was a highly capable and intelligent man with a government job. My mother was overjoyed, convinced that he would provide me with every happiness. But what my mother didn't know was that God had a very different plan for me. My mother didn't dig too deeply into the background of my in-laws because my aunt had already provided her with plenty of information. On top of that, my aunt had guaranteed that they were good, trustworthy people. My uncle's relationship with my in-laws was very strong. My father-in-law and uncle were the best of friends. This reassured my mother enough to proceed with my marriage to their son. Our wedding was a grand affair, celebrated with much joy. When my mother asked me about Faraz, I quietly lowered my head in agreement. I didn't see any flaws in him. He met my standards. Faraz was handsome, and together we looked like a couple straight out of a dream. I was overjoyed to have found someone who matched my expectations. All the women in the family envied my luck. At the beauty parlor, as I was being prepared for the ceremony, everyone kept saying I was the most stunning bride they'd ever seen. I knew that God had blessed me with extraordinary beauty. My eyes were like serene pools, my lips resembled soft rose petals, and my cheeks were as delicate as cotton candy. People often thought I had applied makeup to achieve such rosy cheeks, but in truth, they were naturally pink. I knew that when my husband saw me in my full bridal attire, he would be captivated. I silently smiled and thanked God for making me so beautiful. My wedding took place smoothly, and after the necessary ceremonies, my mother gave me away under the shadow of the Quran. When I arrived at my in-laws' house, I was welcomed with great warmth and care. My husband held my hand while my face remained covered by a veil. I quickly realized that his family was quite traditional and valued modesty. After a few more rituals, my sisters-in-law escorted me to my husband's room. My heart was racing, filled with nervous anticipation. I didn't know how my husband would react to seeing me for the first time, and the uncertainty made me even more anxious. Shortly after, the door to the room opened and my husband entered. My heart felt as if it stopped, and my hands and feet turned cold. Tiny beads of sweat formed on my forehead as he walked closer to me. He reached out and lifted my veil. For a few moments, he was silent, and I felt a flicker of pride, certain that he was mesmerized by my beauty. But my assumption turned out to be completely wrong. After a long pause, his voice cut through the silence, harsh and loud. "What kind of artificial decorations have you plastered on your face?" he said. "Maybe my sister didn't tell you, but I don't like women who doll themselves up. If you want to stay with me, you'll have to live according to my expectations. I don't like women putting on makeup, not in front of others and not in front of me. I prefer simplicity. I hope you can live a life that aligns with my values. If you can do that, it will be better for both of us." His words stunned me. I had been expecting compliments, but instead I was met with criticism. My eyes filled with tears, and I stared at him in disbelief. He looked away and continued, "You have half an hour. Change your clothes and come back. Otherwise, I'll go to sleep. It's already time for me to rest." I was deeply hurt. I silently walked into the bathroom and locked the door. Ever since I was a little girl, I had loved dressing up. Whenever I got ready, my mother used to chide me, saying, "Foolish girl, don't get so dressed up before the wedding. If you look too good before, you won't shine on your wedding day." But now, hearing these words from my husband on our wedding night, I was crushed. I had waited for this day, expecting love, affection, and admiration. Instead, I was met with rejection and disappointment. The joy I had felt just a few hours earlier was replaced by a heavy sadness I hadn't anticipated. I recalled how at the parlor, so many girls had been taking my pictures, and how at the marriage hall, everyone had been praising me. But the one person I had adorned myself for hadn't said a single word. This filled me with a deep sadness. I wiped away my makeup, changed my attire, and came out before the half hour was even up. To my surprise, my husband, who had been cold and distant before, now began praising me. He said that true beauty lies in simplicity and not in artificial adornments. His tone had completely changed, and the harshness from earlier was replaced with warmth. Slowly, he started showing affection, making me feel cherished and significant. His tenderness erased all my negative thoughts, and I finally felt at ease. That night, I found peace in his embrace and drifted into a restful sleep. The next morning felt different. I was used to waking up late, but my husband woke me at 7. I didn't make any fuss because I wanted to live a harmonious life with him. I quickly freshened up, dressed lightly, and adjusted a scarf on my head. When my husband saw me, he smiled, kissed my forehead, and led me outside. Everyone seemed to be waiting for us. I soon realized that my in-laws were early risers, meaning I'd need to adjust to waking up early as well. They all treated me with great respect. While I was sitting there, I kept feeling as if someone's gaze was on me. I looked around but saw no one staring. Perhaps it was just my imagination, but the sensation lingered. Even after breakfast, I still felt like someone was watching me. Eventually, I dismissed the thought as a mere illusion. After breakfast, my husband had to leave for some errands. My sisters-in-law stayed with me, chatting and making me feel welcome. Within a short time, I began to feel at home with them. I knew that the sooner I blended in with my new family and embraced this environment, the easier it would be for me to settle into this new chapter of my life. My father-in-law, in particular, treated me with exceptional kindness. My mother-in-law had passed away some time ago, and my father-in-law's affectionate behavior toward me made me feel like I was his own daughter. It's rare for a father-in-law to be so loving toward a daughter-in-law, and his warmth and support gave me a sense of belonging. I felt fortunate. I had a loving husband and a supportive in-laws household, but sometimes happiness can feel fleeting. Time moved forward steadily, and a few days later, I noticed how much my husband valued simplicity. I began to change my habits, gradually embracing a natural beauty and distancing myself from artificial enhancements. Our marriage progressed smoothly. 6 months went by without a single argument between us. Yet during that time, I frequently felt as though someone was watching me. I mentioned it to my husband once or twice, but he dismissed it as my imagination. I accepted his reassurance, thinking perhaps it was just my mind playing tricks. However, if I had paid closer attention to my surroundings in the house, I might have avoided the ordeal that followed. One morning, my husband woke up much earlier than usual. Seeing him awake, I also got out of bed. He glanced at me and said, "I need to leave for the office a bit early today. Please prepare breakfast while I take a shower." This was unusual, as he had never left for the office this early before. I gave a slight nod and made my way to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. The house was still quiet since everyone was asleep. My husband ate in silence, offered me a light kiss on the forehead, and left for the office. I couldn't shake the strange feeling that had settled in my chest, as though something terrible was about to happen, as if my entire world was on the verge of collapsing. Acting on impulse, I called out to him just as he stepped out the door. Running to him, I clung to his chest, holding on tightly. It wasn't something I had planned, it simply happened. He gently pulled me back and said, "Don't worry, I'll be back soon. It's just a small matter at work." I wanted to tell him how uneasy I felt, but the words didn't come. I watched him leave after he kissed my cheek and then returned inside. Shaking off my lingering unease, I went back to preparing breakfast for everyone else. I had just set the table when the landline phone rang. My younger sister-in-law answered it, and we all turned our eyes toward her. I could see her face lose color, her expression growing increasingly alarmed. My father-in-law quickly stood up and took the phone from her. As he listened, his own face grew pale, though he spoke calmly. After a few moments, he ended the call and told us he was heading to the hospital. He glanced briefly at me and then looked at his younger son. "Make sure the house is cleaned up," he said. "I'll be back." I felt a cold dread creeping over me. My heart raced as I stepped forward, my voice shaky. "What do you mean? Why are you asking for the house to be cleaned? Why are you going to the hospital? Is everything okay with Faraz? You haven't received any bad news about him, have you?" My father-in-law gave a small nod and said in a heavy voice, "Faraz has passed away. I'm going to the hospital now." His words hit me like a thunderclap. The weight of them sank in slowly, leaving me utterly stunned. I sank to the floor, my legs unable to hold me. Around me, the family reacted in disbelief and sorrow, their grief filling the room. My father-in-law, trying to hold back tears, left for the hospital. For me, the world tilted on its axis. Time seemed to stop. A short while later, Faraz's body was brought home. Seeing him lying motionless shattered me. My cries echoed through the house, my tears unending. We had been married for only 6 months, and now my husband had left me alone in this vast, unforgiving world. I didn't know how to process it. I sobbed, screamed, pleaded, but no amount of pain or tears could bring him back. He wasn't going to wake up. Shortly after, his burial took place, and he was laid to rest. In the days and weeks that followed, my life felt drained of color. Everything seemed gray and lifeless. I had already abandoned my interest in makeup and dressing up, but now I stopped caring about myself entirely. I would wear the same outfit for days at a time. Lost in my grief, my family's behavior began to shift. While some initially offered comfort, others kept their distance. Rumors spread, and some of the women in my in-laws' circle began planting poisonous thoughts in my sisters-in-law's minds. They whispered that my presence had brought misfortune to their brother. "Your sister-in-law's bad luck is why your brother passed away," they said. This baseless blame poisoned the atmosphere at home. My sisters-in-law started avoiding me, their attitude growing colder. I was already grappling with the overwhelming loss of my husband, but now I felt abandoned and judged. The people who had once welcomed me warmly now treated me like an outsider, making my grief even heavier to bear. It felt as if my sorrow was being compounded by the very people I had hoped would support me. Deep down, I knew that this wasn't my fault. No one's presence, no bad luck, could dictate the course of someone's life or death. A person's fate is written, and no one can change that. But convincing others of this truth seemed impossible. Time dragged on, each day more difficult than the last. The home that had once been a place of comfort now felt stifling. Then one day, everything changed again. For a long while, I had felt like someone was watching me, but now I began to see actual shadows near my room. At night, I'd catch fleeting glimpses of figures moving just out of view. The faintest sound or movement would set my nerves on edge. I started sleeping less and less, staying awake through the long hours of the night, clutching my blanket tightly, my heart racing with fear. I was terrified, unsure of what was real and what was my imagination. The nights were no longer just lonely. They were filled with a haunting sense of dread. When Faraz was alive, I had nothing to fear. I could sleep soundly at night, feeling secure in his presence. But after he left me, after his sudden departure from this world, I found myself unable to rest. My nights became restless and filled with unease. I couldn't share my fears with anyone, knowing full well that I no longer held the same place in this household that I once did. In those early days of my marriage, I was welcomed, valued. But now, in the wake of Faraz's passing, it felt as though everyone saw me as the reason behind it. Whether they said it openly or not, I could sense it in their glances, in their whispers. And so I kept my anxieties to myself. I feared that if I spoke up, everyone would think I was losing my mind. They would dismiss my fears as paranoia. But then came the day that changed everything. It was late in the evening when I stepped out of my room only to be grabbed suddenly by someone. Before I could even see who it was, the stranger overpowered me. I struggled, but I couldn't stop what was happening. This man violated me, tearing away the dignity I had left. When he was done, he tossed me back into my room as if I were nothing. In my desperation, as he turned to leave, I managed to tear away the black cloth covering his face. What I saw left me frozen in place. The man standing before me was not a stranger. It was my father-in-law, Faraz's own father. I gasped in disbelief, the words tumbling from my mouth. "Abu, you?" He shoved me aside and left the room without a word. For several moments, I remained rooted to the spot. I couldn't comprehend what had just happened. My father-in-law, the man I had respected, the man who had mourned his son's death alongside me, had taken advantage of my vulnerability. His daughter's shroud hadn't even dulled from the funeral, and here he was, exploiting the darkness of the house to commit this heinous act. I felt disgusted, betrayed, and utterly helpless. I thought that losing my husband was the worst pain I could endure, but this was unbearable. It shattered what little sense of safety I had left. Even if I told anyone, who would believe me? The idea that my father-in-law had assaulted me seemed inconceivable. I knew that any accusations I made would only invite scorn and disbelief. People would assume I was making it up. It felt as though I had been stripped of my value as a person. I was just an object, something to be used and discarded. My father-in-law had taken advantage of my isolation. I was all alone in this house, left to carry this burden by myself. I sat in my room for hours, crying. The beauty I had once taken pride in felt like a curse. My appearance, which others admired so much, seemed to have only brought me misery. After my husband's death, it was his own father who had first violated my dignity. That night, as I wiped away my tears, I made a decision. Once my mourning period was over, I would leave this house and never look back. I would cut all ties with his family. I couldn't live under the same roof as the man who had done this to me. But I had no idea what awaited me. Time crept forward, day by day. I avoided my father-in-law as much as possible. I no longer spoke with him or sought his company. He, in turn, seemed to have changed his attitude toward me. He acted kind, even caring. At first, I thought it might be guilt. Perhaps he regretted what he had done. But there was something else, something that made me uneasy. 10 days before my mourning period ended, my father-in-law invited my parents over to the house. I was surprised and confused. What could he possibly want to discuss with them? I felt uneasy, but I couldn't ask outright. After all, I barely held any standing in this household anymore. My sisters-in-law and brother-in-law made sure to remind me of my diminished status. They treated me poorly, humiliating me at every opportunity. I had come to expect their disdain. Yet my father-in-law continued to show me kindness, or so I thought. He seemed different, as if he was trying to make up for his actions. When my parents arrived, they looked worried and confused. My father-in-law sat casually, one leg crossed over the other, speaking to them as if nothing was wrong. I sat quietly beside my mother, my head covered with a scarf. The entire situation felt surreal. I couldn't imagine what my father-in-law had in mind. He looked at me for a moment, then turned his attention to my parents. "You both know, sir," he began, "that my son has passed away. She is your daughter, and she is the daughter-in-law of our family," my father-in-law said, his voice calm but deliberate. "She is very important to us. You are already aware, he continued, that I am not Faraz's biological father. His words startled me. I turned to look at him abruptly and then at my parents, who nodded slightly, indicating they already knew. My father-in-law pressed on. I would like to marry your daughter. This is permissible since I am not her biological father-in-law, only her stepfather-in-law. According to religious rules, I am not considered her mahram. As soon as the words left his mouth, I shot to my feet, my voice trembling with rage. I have never seen anyone as shameless as you, I shouted. Your son hasn't even been gone that long, and you're already dreaming of wearing a wedding garland? Turning to my parents, I cried, Mother, Father, I would rather die than marry this man. I can't even begin to tell you what he's done to me. I felt like I had completely lost control. Words kept pouring out of me in a torrent of anger. But my father-in-law stood silently, his expression unreadable. I might have continued ranting, but my mother suddenly rose from her seat and slapped me hard across the face. The sting silenced me, and I stared at her in shock. This was the same mother who had always loved me fiercely, and yet here she was speaking words I never thought I would hear. Sit down and shut up, she commanded. I didn't come here to listen to your nonsense. You know that people are already calling you a cursed woman. Society has labeled you unlucky, saying that anyone who marries you will die. What's wrong if your father-in-law wants to marry you? I stood frozen, my mind reeling. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mother, who had always been my greatest supporter, was now dismissing my anguish. I tried to explain to her that my father-in-law was not a good man, but neither she nor my father would listen. They had already made up their minds. In their eyes, I was a widow, considered unlucky by society. To them, no other man would marry me. They had no intention of keeping me at home for the rest of my life. When my mourning period ended, they arranged my marriage to my father-in-law. I protested loudly, but no one cared. No one listened. On the wedding night, as he entered the room, now my husband, I felt as though the earth had swallowed me whole. That night, he confessed something that made my skin crawl. From the moment I first saw you, he said, I knew I was in love with you. I resolved then and there that I would marry you, no matter what. I had no idea that fate would present me with such a perfect opportunity. His words made me feel sick. I was repulsed by the man standing before me, but I had no escape. Society had left me with no choice. Over time, his own children severed ties with him because of his decision. Yet he seemed unfazed. He moved me to a separate house where we lived alone. Outwardly, our pairing didn't look so unusual. He appeared younger than his age, and the difference between us wasn't immediately obvious. He delighted in seeing me dressed up and adorned. Eventually, the circumstances wore me down. I stopped fighting. I accepted my new life, though I could never erase the deep resentment I felt toward him. No matter how